We're at the seventh part of our 8-part series. We're winding toward the end. We've taken a long journey, and on the journey so far, we've learned about the fact that God wants to have a relationship with us. We've learned that God does indeed love us. We've learned that God does indeed want to communicate with us in prayer on a frequent basis during each day. We've learned that when we experience pain and discomfort in life, that God walks alongside us in comfort when we experience that pain. We have journeyed into the difficult transformation of forgiveness, that God wants us to forgive, that it's difficult to forgive, but we can learn to do that by asking God to help us, give us what we need to forgive. Last week, we looked at those difficult parts of our lives that are hard to change. And we learned that anything is possible with God. You know, we can only change ourselves so far, but then the rest is up to God. And we have to ask for God's help. Today, in our seventh part, we're admitting, I believe in God, but I still worry all the time. Now, this whole series is about admitting that we are, in fact, Christian atheists. We believe in God, but we live in our lives daily as if God doesn't exist. Craig Rochelle wrote the book on it, and I'm heavily drawing on his material, and I want to give him credit for that. Okay, so here we are. We all know that we're not supposed to worry, right? You did know that, didn't you? We're not supposed to worry. Sometimes it's hard. Let me tell you right up front, worry is bad for our health. I think we probably all are aware of that. The word worry comes from the old High German language, the word Würgen, W-R-G-E-N. And that literally means to strangle, to constrict, to choke. Right? That sounds like worry feels, doesn't it? It certainly does. Worry absolutely strangles the life out of us. There are just so many things to worry about, right? How can we stop? That's the question. When there's nothing to worry about, we even worry about that. You know, since worry is bad for our health, we worry about that too. How do we stop? Somebody once said, flurry, which is all that activity that we do, flurry dissipates faith. You know, it loses its effectiveness when we are active and overactive like that. Worry instead constipates it. You know, to strangle it, to constrict it, to choke it, to constipate it. That's what worry does. But Christian atheists can always find something to worry about, right? Let's list some things. The economy is tight. Jobs are unstable or hard to find. The kids are growing up, and college and weddings loom ahead. We worry about how do we keep our kids safe in the world today. We worry about how we're going to care for aging parents. We worry about how we're going to adjust once aging parents have passed away. Perhaps someone we love has something unusual physically going on. We worry about that. We say, what if? What if? I worry about the church. What if? Although we believe in God, we tend to trust more in our own abilities than in God's faithfulness. For Christian atheists, our worry proves that we don't trust in God as we claim to. We think, I know God's a good God and all that, but I've got the situation handled. And when it turns out we don't have it handled, then it falls to us, not to God, to fix it, or that's what we think. Craig Rochelle tells an interesting story. He lives in Edmond, Oklahoma, and apparently it's kind of a rustic community, and they maybe live on the edge of the community. So he and his family and kids were out one day working in their yard, and one of his kids, a 2-year-old boy, who the family had nicknamed Bookie, kind of got off by himself, and he was playing, and the rest of the family was off working somewhere else in the yard, and all of a sudden the dad heard Bookie talking about his friend, that he had to come and see his friend. So the dad hears this, and the dad goes to find Bookie and finds Bookie sitting there on the ground, and 2 foot away was a rattlesnake. And Craig Rochelle says he's deathly afraid of rattlesnakes. And anyway, he manages to pick up a shovel, and Bookie says, come see my friend. And Craig picks up a shovel and manages to cut off the snake's head and get rid of it. We kind of treat worry the same way, like our friend. We don't consciously talk about it or think about it that way, but how we live tells a different story. We clutch our worry to our chest, as we did when we were young with stuffed animals in our childhood. We use many euphemisms to talk about worry. We say things like, I'm not worried, I'm concerned about something, right? Or perhaps, I'm not a worrier, I just have a lot on my mind. You ever say that? How about, I'm working through some issues, I'm not worrying. What are some of your other favorites? I covered them. Anybody have any other favorites? We'd rather sound like a smart person than a worrywart. So we use substitute terminology. But no matter what you call it, worry is still a sin. Did you know that? In Philippians 4:6, Paul tells us not to be anxious about anything. And in Romans 14:23, he says, everything that doesn't come from faith is sin. Now that's pretty clear. Pretty clear. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Worry is the opposite of faith. When we live by faith, we believe that God has everything under control. But if we start to worry, how we live says the opposite. Take, for example, if we're worried about losing our job. If we worry about losing our job, what are we saying? We're saying essentially that our jobs are our providers. But isn't God our provider? What if God has something else planned for us? And what if our path to that something else is through some pain? Will we still trust God to provide during that time? Worry, in essence, is the sin of distrusting the promises and the power of God. It's choosing to dwell on, to think about the worst case scenario. It's faith in the bad things rather than faith in God.